Okay, I'll just give everybody 30-second warning and then we'll call the meeting to order. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Just for the record, we'll call this meeting to order 1:08 p.m. Before I move on to disclosure of interest, I do want to take, regrettably, this is the third time in as many meetings I've had to start a meeting with an announcement of this nature, where we have to take some time to commemorate and to mourn the death, the killing, the murder of another police officer who was killed in the line of duty. This time, this is the Sergeant Eric Mueller was killed in the line of duty on May 11th. His funeral was actually held today at 11 o'clock this morning. Last month, it was Sergeant Maureen Bro from Quebec, the Quebec Provincial Police. The month before that, it was Constable Travis Jordan, who's 35 years old, and Constable Brett Ryan, who was 30 in Edmonton, who were both killed, murdered in the line of duty. We've had 10 officers since September of 2022 that have lost their lives in the line of duty in service of their communities. And
hello?
That's fine. We've had 10 officers that have been killed in the line of duty in Canada since September of 2022. And the tragedy of that is unspeakable. And there aren't any words. That they feel hollow and they feel like they're inadequate, and they feel like we have to make these announcements at the beginning of every board meeting. And it's who cares about the announcement in and of itself, right? It's the death and the tragedy and the loss of life to the services, to the families. And, you know, we're not even just talking about it in the context of death. It was March 16th when the two young officers in Edmonton were killed in the line of duty. But 3 days before that, on March 13th, we had two of our very own officers that were attending to a call over at Kipps Lane that were seriously wounded and rushed to the hospital. Thank God, not fatal injuries, but incredibly serious injuries for those who may think, well, this isn't a London issue. And so I just wanted to take a moment at the top of this meeting to say our hearts, our thoughts, our prayers are with the, with the service, with Eric Mueller, Sergeant Eric Mueller's family. Although we're not physically there at the funeral, we're there emotionally, we're there spiritually, we're there from a supportive perspective. In the board, I'm speaking in my own capacity, but I'm speaking on behalf of the board here that I hope that we don't have to open the fourth meeting, the next meeting, to make it 4 times in a row with an announcement of this nature. But I wanted to just take a moment of silence to mourn the loss of Sergeant Eric Mueller. So if I could take a minute, it's just a moment of silence. Thank you, everybody. I am going to dedicate some of my comments later on in my chair's verbal report to some of the initiatives that I mean, there's nothing that we can do to eliminate this possibility from existing, but some things that boards and services and associations and different advocacy groups across the country can do to mitigate this effect. So I'll highlight some of those later on, but I do appreciate your indulgence there. With that, is there a disclosure of interest from any members of the board? Any conflicts, any disclosures of interest that want to be disclosed? Seeing none. Is there any new business from any of the members that we want to raise? Yep, go ahead, Vice Chair Walker.
I just wanted to give a brief update to everybody on Bill C-48, which was just tabled
the other day and I sat in on, which is the bail reform.
Perfect. I'll when we get to that point in the chair's report, I'll pass it over to you to talk about that. All right. Any other new business from any other members that we want to add to the agenda? So what we'll do instead of adding that as a new agenda item, just at the end of my chairs, I'll just pass it over to you. There's no need for that added as a new agenda. Okay. All right. So I'll dispense with the motion because we're not actually adding it as a new agenda item. In your package, you have the minutes from our last board meeting, which was held on April 20th, 2023. Are there any changes, revisions, amendments, deletions, anything with regards to the minutes that you would like to bring to our attention? Seeing none, may I have a mover for the following motion that the board approves as presented the minutes of the April 2023 public meeting? Moved by Councillor Lehman, seconded by Member Branscombe. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. Thank you. Moving on through the agenda, I'm going to look over to Deputy Chief Reynolds for the Criminal Investigation Services Mandatory Report. Over to you, Deputy Chief.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Sorry. Try that again. Thank you, Chair, and through you. Obviously, you've received a report, as has the members of the public. This report is submitted in line with the adequacy standards under the Police Services Act, as well as in regards to board policy, and also in compliance with our criminal investigation management procedure. As you can see, the one thing I want to point out in this report, I think it's important because a lot of people ask is, why do they have 2022 statistics? Because those statistics are driven out of our UCR codes within the police service, so we can capture them at year end of 2022, obviously presenting the report today. However, unfortunately for us, Stats Canada don't release their statistics till July of 2022. So or 2023, sorry. When you look at this report, this is a snap in time right now of today, or when this report was done. I did note that there was actually, I'll give Chief McIntyre credit for that. We did note that there was no actual timestamp on when we actually recorded, because they can change as UCR codes change, as we might have a attempt murder that would become a murder later on. That can all change. So from year to year, they will vary. That's all I'd say about that. Pending any questions, I recommend that the board receives the report for your information in compliance with the procedures.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chief Reynolds. Board, any questions for the Deputy Chief with regards to the report? Yeah, Vice Chair Walker.
Thanks. So thank you for providing this report, and thank you for spending so much of your time with me leading up to today's meeting. I really appreciate it. One of the things I really notice is the number of files that are closed, or what do you call it in here there? Or am I on the wrong report still?
Clearance,
yeah.
Right?
And I said to you, and I want to reiterate that I think it speaks to the level of policing we have in our community and the commitment of police officers to be able to do that. So I appreciate all of those individuals that are participating in allowing that to be closed. That must be difficult. I also wanted to just outline one issue I did speak with you about, which is around the reporting of homicides and attempted homicides, which historically have to do with men that are murdered by definition of the Latin derivative of homicide. We did, with respect to hate-motivated crimes, include an area where we would address the breakdown of gender.
We're in the...
Yes, but I just was going to do a comparison.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
So I was just wondering if we could ask for that to be done moving forward, and if that's something that we need a board motion for, and we're not prepared to deal with that right now. I can ask that it be brought to the next meeting. So it was discussed last year, but we only really related it to the hate crimes report, not this report. That it would be helpful to have you know, a breakdown of gender and homicides and attempted homicides as maybe a subcategory, which we spoke about. Is that something you see as being feasible?
Sorry, just so I guess because we talked about both
I
reports.
know.
I want to be clear. Are you asking me if I can break down for the board or the deputy of next year or chief can break down for the board how many female victims there were, how many male victims there
Right.
were?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so do we need a motion for that, to have that happen?
I'll defer to the chair on that.
I guess I defer to the chair. I gotta defer to see what the will of the board is, right? So I need some clarity in terms of what your proposed motion would be.
Okay, just that moving forward, the criminal investigation service report include a breakdown under the offenses of numbers of women and numbers of men who were victims of homicide or attempted homicide.
Okay, so from a Robert's Rules perspective, I need a seconder of that motion to put it on the floor for debate and discussion. Do we have a seconder? Okay, moved by member Branscombe. Okay, that motion is now on the floor. Debate, discussion, questions from any of the members with regards to member Walker, Vice Chair Walker's proposed motion. Anybody have any questions? Debate?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mayor.
In the termination of men versus women, is that a determination made by the police, or is that something determined by the individual in the way that they identify?
Actually, I think it should include everything. And when we get to this next report, it's outlined by male, female, non-binary, not identified, or applicable. And that's what I would request.
That makes more sense.
Thank you. Any other questions? Debate? Member Branscombe, as a seconder of the motion, do you want to weigh in on that, or are you good? You're good? All right. Okay, if there's no further debate or discussion, then I'll call the question. All those opposed, anybody opposed to member Vice Chair Walker's motion that's on the floor? All in favor? All right. That
So-
motion is carried.
Just to close off this one for me, I just want to again reiterate my support for the members and everybody involved in making sure that these issues are addressed in a timely way and closed off. So thank you. Maybe you could pass that on.
I will, and thank you, Vice Chair Walker.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair Walker. So we have that motion. Are there any further questions before I call for a motion on to accept the report for Deputy Chief Reynolds on his report? Okay.
Excuse me.
Seeing none, may I have a mover for the following motion that the board receives for informational purposes the 2022 Criminal Investigation Services Mandatory Report. Be a mover.
Oh, I'll move that.
All right, moved by Vice Chair Walker, seconded by member Branscombe. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. Staying with you, Deputy Chief Reynolds, we're going to go to the 2022 hate motivated crime incidents report.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. So as you're aware, this report is submitted in regards to provincial adequacy standards as well as board policy. I will take just an opportunity to speak quickly here about a couple things. A lot of questions came up about and certainly during my conversations with Vice Chair Walker in regards to the definitions. And just a simple breakdown, not that it's ever simple, but hate crime is an actual criminal offense that was committed against the ethnicities of the listed or racial, everything that's listed there. The hate incident is a behavior that was motivated against a person that fits in the same descriptors that are not criminal acts. And there was a bit of confusion, so I just want to make sure that was clear to everyone in regards to what the definitions are. I will highlight that there were 80 criminal hate crime offenses in the City of London that fell within our jurisdiction. There were 83 hate incidents, and 163 total. Of those, there were 80 criminal charges 80 criminal offenses, 37 charges were laid regarding them. There are different factors. A question might be raised. why there wasn't 80 charges laid. There's many different things that, you know, will play into that, including the police investigation, the evidence that's available, participation by the victim, and unknown suspects, things like that. So pending any questions, I present the report to the board.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Reynolds. Board, I have some questions, but as chair, I'll wait to the end.
You go first, because I've got some, and maybe they're overlapping, so
Okay.
you go ahead.
If anybody else, I'll look at it. Good. All right. You just touched upon my first area, right? So there's been a pretty dramatic increase over the past couple of years. There's a 183% increase in hate crimes, 177% increase in hate incidents from 2021 and 2022. I think they're described as kind of, I don't know if they're described as anomalies, but there's a departure from kind of the years preceding that, right? Despite the foregoing, there's a 33% decrease in charges during that same time, right? So we're seeing a 181% increase or 177% increase, but a corresponding decrease of 33% in charges. Can you unpack that for me in terms of why we would see such divergent, disparate increase in one, but a decrease in the other?
I'll do my best.
Yeah.
What I would say to that is, you know, if you look at those years, and we've had some horrific things that have happened. Obviously, the assault homicide occurring in our city. We're really out there. Our front line, you know, our outreach, diversity outreach, our hate crime officer, our members of the front line in this police service, as well as our CID side, civilians included, our 911 center. I truly believe there is an actual result of people are more comfortable to report the crimes, and that's great for us. They're more comfortable to come forward. They feel included. They feel inclusive, and they're not scared. You know, there were times probably where maybe people didn't trust the police, and just because of maybe background and stuff like that. But that's one of the reasons. As far as the decrease in the charges in regards to only 37 charges, I've touched on that. That just comes down to the investigations individually.
Thank you. I know this second question of mine is touched upon in the report, but I think maybe for the benefit of people that haven't read the report or maybe just listening in, what steps have the police service taken to kind of educate members of communities as to their rights when it comes to you know, reporting hate crimes, going into maybe communities that historically or may come new immigrants or refugees that may come from another part of the world that may not have the same level of trust with the police in their respective countries? Has the London Police Service taken any steps to proactively engage those communities, and if so, what are those steps?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Chair, and through you. You know, our community services unit, our diversity and outreach unit, our hate crime officer, as I've already mentioned, our frontline officer, engaging through our VSML system in regards to victim support. We're in the community. We're going to presentations. We're on many boards. I myself, as you're aware, sit on the boards with you, and you know, we're attending consultations, public meetings, and we're teaching out. And not only are we teaching out in the community and building those partnerships, we're also teaching out within our own police service, which is very important through our in-service training and modules and things like that. So.
And my final question before I pass it over to my board colleagues here is, I noticed this year, not a top 5 list that anybody wants to be on, right? But generally speaking, when I've looked at these reports in the past, there's the same kind of community groups that are on, right? So we have the Black community in London, we have the LGBTQ community, we have the Jewish community, and the Middle Eastern / Muslim community, right? But I've noticed that this year, I think for the first time, we have the inclusion of the South Asian community as being on that top 5 list. Partly an unfair question, but in light of that, is there any deliberate kind of active engagement that the police service is contemplating about dealing with members of the South Asian community to kind of speak to that, the fact that there's been an increase and now they're reflected on this list?
I'm actually happy to answer that question, Chair. That's a great question, and I actually noticed that myself. And this is not just in London. This is right now provincially. It's the largest group that has had an increase across internationally. And I was in contact with our hate crime officer, Mohammed Gulad, and he has totally assured me that they are well engaged within that community and doing outreach as we speak. So. Yes, there's been lots of training and making sure that they're comfortable to come forward and speak to us.
Thank you. And I know I said that was my last one, but when you said hate crime officer, again, for the benefit of maybe people listening in or members of the public or media, can you maybe articulate and expand on what the mandate, the role of the hate crime officer is with the London Police Service?
Absolutely. So the hate crime officer obviously was a big part of this report here. The hate crime officer deals with all of our diverse communities, is responsible for reaching out, attending meetings, representing the police service. Obviously, he's supported by our diversity and equity team, as well as our community services team. And he also assists us with all the hate crime investigations. He actually does the hate crime investigations in consultation with our CID Office Criminal Investigation Division.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Reynolds.
Yes, and I will point out, it is in the report, but just for the public, he also personally contacts anyone that is involved in a hate crime incident or a hate incident.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
To my colleagues, thanks for indulging me with those questions. I know it's a little deviation from the rules, but that being said, those are my questions. Anybody else have questions?
Yeah.
Vice Chair Walker.
Thanks. I just wondered, about 25 years ago, I guess, there were initiatives being undertaken to ensure that charges could be laid without relying upon the victim's testimony. There could also be a conviction. And in some of these cases, I'm certain because of fear, individuals who have been targeted with hate may be hesitant to come forward, but there are others witnessing it. And I'm wondering what actions or steps are you able to take to attempt to have charges laid without relying upon the primary victim?
I think I'm understanding your question. In other words, could we lay a criminal charge if our victim didn't cooperate?
Yes, if there were other witnesses.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and do
Yes,
you?
absolutely.
And do you know how many?
I do not.
No.
No, but I did ask our hate crime officer that specific question after speaking.
I
with
really
you.
appreciate your honesty.
Yeah.
I do not.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And also, I just have a couple more. I do agree that the community is becoming better enlightened about these issues. And somebody said to me around it, from a racialized community, the goal is to, if you see it, you stop it and you report it. Or alternatively, if it's unsafe, you would see it, report it. And in doing so, you stop it. And I think that was a very succinct way of expressing his views. I do appreciate here that you have identified the gender of, and as I said earlier, 74% male, 71 male, 51 female, non-binary 2, and not identified 36. And I think that really helps, particularly moving forward with public awareness campaigns, so you know who to direct specific issues to. I did want to just highlight a little bit more on what Chair Shabar said around the individuals, the significant increases of, in all areas, really, members of the Black community have been the most frequently victimized since 2019. Total of 38 occurrences in 2022, which is a 19% increase. Some people may say, well, it's only 38 occurrences, and I can tell you that every occurrence impacts every person differently, and I think we need to look at it as, one is too many, and how can we really reach out and do further efforts to end it. The other thing I noticed is that, again, like Chair Shabar, around the Middle Eastern and South Asian communities, it's 50% increase. I find that unbelievable and quite alarming. And again, I'm glad that we are or you are taking action to end that. I just wondered, the one thing I didn't address with you by phone, and I should have, is around the organized crime section. Can you highlight for me what is happening there and the importance of it? Oh, sorry.
I think it's the wrong.
No, page 6 of 7.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
Okay.
I should have
Sorry.
asked you, but I didn't see it until today.
No, I was.
Sorry.
No, it's all good.
It's
Page
around the
6.
sharing of information at hate crime and extremism investigative team workshops, and I'm wondering what
Yeah.
role do police play in that?
What role do we play
Yeah.
in regards to it's written out here, but I will restate it. For the hate crime and extremism, we have an investigative team, which is part of the workshops that we attend. So that's across the whole province. It's not just, maybe I'm not following your
No,
question.
you don't have to read it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
What I was trying to get at was I see that there's attendance and sharing of information.
Right.
And I'm wondering when the information is shared from police to others, what is the outcome of that? Do they undertake to try to do some of the same work we're doing here?
Absolutely. We learn from each other. It's trending, finding trends, finding we're having the same problem. Sometimes there's a new problem that, we haven't, it's not happening in London, but it might be happening in North Bay. So.
And what is the relationship between organized crime and hate crimes?
In our service? Oh, what is the
Well,
relationship?
you've got it here under the organized crime
Oh,
section.
yes.
What is the relationship between the organized crime section and, hate crimes in general terms?
So I'm thinking you're asking me about what does organized crime do in regards to hate crimes?
No, I know what
Like
they
gathering
do.
intelligence or?
Yeah, so I was just sort of more curious around the impact of organized crime on hate crimes.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I
no,
apologize.
It's me. I don't feel like I'm connecting
Yeah,
with you today, and I accept responsibility for that. So
It kind of went off here, so sorry about that. Okay, so Vice Chair, I apologize. I understand what you're asking me now. Organized crime in regards to criminal element towards this. So an example would be, obviously not in this work, but human trafficking would be a good example of taking advantage of members of help me, Chief, with the word, please. Vulnerability,
yeah,
members of vulnerability, and taking advantage. And yes, that is happening for sure.
and that's considered a hate crime?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, go ahead, because I'm not really
Yeah, let me
following
help
the
out.
question.
No, no, no.
I'm confusing.
Yeah, so organized crime meets with, they're part of a large team where all of the services get together and discuss, and largely that's intelligence led. So it's your extreme terrorist piece, that is hate. So it's large scale hate that utilizes many different levels of government.
Yeah.
Who is a person of interest? Where do they need to focus? Is there investigative leads that need to come out of that? That would get disseminated down to the various criminal investigative units that would be applicable. But think of organized crime being large, high level, and then terrorist related.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so just one last question. If it's a trafficking situation and it is therefore what you're saying by your definition, it's hatred because it's abusing somebody's vulnerabilities, do you lay hate related charges in that case?
But
Okay, I can jump in and help
Yeah.
you. I think Paul was referencing when we get into this teams, organizations working together to combat things, but specifically if a criminal offense occurs and it is specific to one of the prohibited grounds, I would like to term them as gender being one of them, and we can make that out in facts and issues in a criminal case, then it would be designated as such as a hate crime, and there's a different penalty that exists for all charges. So it doesn't need to be called a terrorist charge or an actual hate crime. We have a provision that the prosecutors add for elevated penalty when certain criteria are met.
Okay. Yeah. And then my last question, and I appreciate your indulgence, has to do with not so much the hate-related crime, but the charges. Of the crimes that are determined to be crimes, and you note that there are significantly fewer charges, how many of the charges, how many of the victims of hate-related crimes are women.
I believe is already reported here.
Where charges have been laid, because the reason I'm asking that is across Canada, there are very few. And
Right.
so you've got here females 51. I don't know how that jives with the federal stats, which it's very rare to have a charge laid for a woman who's experiencing a hate crime.
I believe that's captured in so according to this chart, there was 51
Mhm.
female victims, and there was 27 suspect females.
Yeah.
I'm
So not
Yeah.
so much the suspects. I'm just wondering about the hate crimes. I just wondered how it was that you were able to lay so many charges with women as victims when it's so rare that it happens.
The charges were laid as a result of our investigations
Yeah,
and
I
the
know.
evidence that we're able to gain.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. It's just that it's so rare, like very rare to have charges laid in those cases. So you could be used as the model of what to do then, I suppose.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Okay, questions? Yeah, Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you for the report. And I was wondering, do we track the data or look for trends in those that are responsible for the incidents and the crimes? Is that something we look at as well? Because I had heard that some of the South Asian hate crimes were committed by other South Asian people, and I don't know if that's something that we're looking at.
Go ahead.
That's a great question. Through you, Chair. So any intel pieces, so every file that we take in is reviewed by the hate crime officer, but that always gets relayed back to org crime. Organized crime has an intelligence database, and they track that material there, looking for trends. If there's something they need to alert other agencies to, that is, again, another benefit of their network of officers, because then they reach out to other jurisdictions. Many times, it's not necessarily a resident of London committing those crimes. They're coming in from somewhere else. So there's a larger database that does assist police in tracking that and tracking their movement.
Is there anything of that would be helpful for the public to know?
When there are specific trends or something that would be, I don't want to say public worthy, that's not intelligence or source led, we share that and would use opportunity to teach out to those various groups. So it could be, an example could be like an inherent vulnerability or a risk or a trend we're seeing somewhere else, and then we can safeguard in advance with that information. Source information, intelligence, of course, is not. It's locked down, unfortunately, but when there's pieces that we can share, we take those opportunities to teach out.
And from a community and safety wellness type, as we look at our plan and what we can do, in terms of hate crimes, would looking at the offenders and knowing how we could best prevent some of this be useful?
Such a great, that's, you're asking about the preventative piece, right? How do we do that? And I think, sometimes we don't know the why behind the actions. But is it about early engagement? Is it about, trust building in communities, about relationships that we're all human? It seems to be almost a humanity issue when we get into that. And it's, such an interesting piece, like, a swastika painted on the wall impacts everyone, especially a racialized individual. It's not just the Jewish community. Like, our outreach teams reach every community when that starts to happen, because there's a wave of uncertainty then that goes through the community, and a wave of fear. And so then you think, man, the impact is much larger than we'll ever understand. But then, on top of that, you realize that these numbers are probably a fraction of what's happening in the community. And so when I look at the report, I look at, are they going up? And I know that seems funny, but I want to see them going up. I want to see them reported, because we know that most are not reported. So is that translate to the community, to the police? Are we representative of the community? Here's your diversity pieces. Are we extending reach into those communities? Do they feel that sense of belonging? Do they feel safe enough to even reach out to us? Right. So you see all of those pieces, but what's the why? And, and in the major cases that we study, the why is often different, and so that research and that early You look at abuse and trauma lens, and was there a trauma history with the accused? You know, it's so complex, and more research for sure needs to be done.
Thank you. And do you see any value in us collecting the data, the similar type of data that we're collecting on the victims, to be on the perpetrator side as well? Would that be useful?
As to the why, do you mean, or as their
To
intention?
assist with prevention.
Yeah, to assist with prevention. So I would love to say that if we knew why something was happening, hopefully we could work upstream. Sometimes we don't know the why. Sometimes we don't know. Is there an opportunity to leverage that? Whenever we have an opportunity to leverage that, we need to. 100%, I agree with you. And can we then move that out a rung into schools, into different things, different platforms, that information to share? I think there's research that says that's very beneficial. And sometimes we don't know the why, you know.
And just last question, would the collecting the same data on the offender or the perpetrator as we do with the victim, is that something we've explored at all?
Wait, can you just help me with what you mean by that? Which
In terms of race or
Oh,
gender?
racer. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. Is it, where are they coming from? Is it like, you know, one would assume they're not the same racial ethnicity, right? Would that be helpful? Yeah. I think that would be an totally interesting comparison to me. I don't believe we do that. Looking at where, you know, the actual offender, what was their background? You know, part of that goes to their why, though, but I do think it would be very interesting. Yeah. Thank you.
Access to that? Like, is that
Yeah,
something we could,
100%.
moving forward,
Yeah,
just
no,
to
we
see if
do.
it's useful?
Yeah. No, I like the idea of tracking that. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Stevenson. Any other questions? I have 2 follow-up ones. I don't want to belabor this, but any other questions? No. Okay. Deputy Chief Reynolds, I'm going to go back to something that Vice Chair Walker was raising, right? But before I even go back to that, are there any, so if we have hate crimes or hate incidents or hate occurrences that are taking place against individuals from newcomer communities or refugee communities, right? One of the things that, and we're not just talking about it in the context of policing, but access to justice, access to the courts, access to like knowing what your rights are. Sometimes there's certain barriers that exist. So for example, there might be language or linguistic issues that would preclude somebody from accessing, right? And so when we're doing, when the police service is going to investigate a hate crime or a hate incident or a hate occurrence, and you realize that, okay, there might be a barrier here, a language barrier, or linguistic, or some issue, are there any resources that the police service have to kind of, on a micro level, help facilitate maybe better communication or better cooperation from those people that may not feel comfortable speaking? English may not be their first language, right? Is there anything that, any resources that we have, specialized individuals or resources that can be help facilitate success on that front?
Absolutely. Thanks, Patty. Chair, through you, we obviously use translators as needed. You know, we will do every effort we can, obviously, to you know, support the victims, support the people making the crime, and make sure that they're heard by us. Yeah.
Thank you. And then my last question just goes back to the line of communication that you're having with Vice Chair.
Lack of communication.
Well, it's something I want to make sure that I'm clear based on kind of that back and forth, because I was a little hazy after that. So 51. So in that chart there on page 5 of 7, right, there's 74 male victims, 51 female victims, right? So when we're talking about it in the context of hate crime, is it 51 female victims who happen to be female? Like they could have been, the hate crime could have been race-based or religion-based or whatever it is, and but they were women, right? So if somebody, I'll just use my community. There's a Muslim woman walking down the street. She's wearing a hijab, right? Somebody makes some bigoted, racist comment, right? There's an investigation that takes place. Well, it's a woman. They weren't castigated or identified because they were a woman. It was because they were Muslim. But when we mark it down, we say, well, it actually was an incident against a woman, right? As opposed to a hate crime that was taking place against somebody because they were a female, right? Is that, like, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding the clarity on that.
Chair, through you, of course, you are correct.
Okay.
Yes. That person that was one of the 50, it's because they were a female.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
So no
But
other.
it's hate, but it's a hate crime towards the female.
Right.
And it's a hate crime towards the male.
Okay, I got you. That's the clarity I was looking for there. Okay.
So just can I clarify? That? I'm just
Yeah.
sort of still confused. So my question, which I didn't express very well, was around hate crimes against women, specifically because they're women.
Yes.
And so is that what you're telling me? No, that's
No,
what I'm trying
no,
to get at.
no.
Okay.
I'll clarify for you. So that what the chart is just saying, okay, out of all of those occurrences, how many were male victims?
Right.
No matter, not the crime type, but how many were male, how many were female?
Right.
It doesn't say what that one chart above on page 4 speaks to what was our top kind of 5 occurrence types: property damage, violence,
Right.
threats, other falls into. That just looks at, okay, out of all of the occurrences we received, what is the gender of the
Right.
complainant? What is the gender of the suspect?
Okay. So then do you know how many hate crimes were laid against women because they are women? That was what I was talking about, how there are so few.
So this report does not delineate
Right.
the why,
Yes,
why
I
there was a crime.
understand.
Right, yeah.
Okay, I'm
So we
sorry,
don't-
I didn't
yeah.
express that very well, but I want you to know that notwithstanding my error, I still think people should come to London Police Service for more information about this, which is what I had said earlier.
Thank you.
Thank you to both of you for those responses. All right,
So
Board,
cute.
before I move on to the next agenda item, are there any further questions? I know Vice Chair Walker and I have kind of, and Councilor Stevenson have kind of dominated this line of questions. Any other questions about anything about this? Okay, seeing none. Can I get a motion, a mover for the following motion, that the board receives for informational purposes the 2022 hate motivated crime incidents report? I don't know.
Susan.
Susan, moved by Councilor Stevenson, second by Vice Chair Walker. Anyone opposed? Seeing none,
Thank
that
you.
is carried. Thank you to you for those answers there. All right, moving on the agenda, we're at agenda item number 7. Annual use of force statistical report for 2022. Acting Chief McIntyre, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, through you. This is just an addendum to an original report that was submitted to the board on use of force in February of this year. And what it was an error in the conclusion. So I've just spelled out in this addendum what that was. And basically the conclusion of the report speaks to how many times did the police use force when a citizen called us to that location. They were calling us for call for service, versus the police initiated the call for service, i.e. a traffic stop. We had those numbers wrong. The report speaks to the correct numbers. So I just wanted to submit that to the board just for your receipt. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions
I
for?
do, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's why we're here. Yeah.
Um, So I just wanted to be sure that I understand it. So originally, there had been 68 and 73%, which was the threshold related to a call for service. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
close. I'll help you.
Okay, yeah.
So originally the report said when a citizen called the police for help, how many times do we use force? We originally said 77% of the time. The accurate piece is a range. If I do the actual math correctly, and there's some complexities in this math, but it is 68 to 73% of the time when a citizen calls us and force was used out of all of the use of force reports in total. The second stat that was given in error was when the police initiate a call for service, how many times then was force used? We previously reported 23. In fact, it's 27 to 32% of the time.
Okay, so it's higher.
Higher.
Okay. So I just had one last question about this, because the stats then are wrong in the charts.
No. The only error observed in the report for me, unless it was written somewhere else, is just really in that concluding paragraph. So if it's referencing an early chart, then yes, but that goes to correct it.
Okay, so can you help me understand how it goes to correct it? Like, so for instance, when I'm looking at the last page here and it says,
What page are you on?
sorry, this is 8 of 9. It says only 23% of all crimes were initiated by police. And then it goes on to say 77%, 180 citizen, 85 police, 34 animal of all encounters were initiated by a source outside or other than a member of the police service. So what I'm asking though is when you take like an overview report like this and it's not thread throughout and made available to the public, they don't understand or may not understand what it's referring to. And I think it should be clear. So I'm just wondering, like, if there's some way we could get the report back, but have it consistent with the other reports we've received on the very same issue, but with the numbers changed.
So to highlight some of the issues with this is now moving forward, we have a new use of force report, right? It's a brand new use of force report that's more comprehensive.
Right.
We've actually created a tool with our business analytics unit to move this data automatically from an electronic report. It was hand-bound before, from an electronic reporting mechanism into a database. So now the database will spit out the numbers with some accuracy.
Right.
Before we get into human error and who through the past had collated the reports and tracked it and what they thought it meant. So the ranges I give you look to correct the interpretation of those stats, but moving forward, the second paragraph of my report speaks to this new dashboard that we have created. So the report coming to the board next year will look totally different. And my intention is to get it clarified so that the reader can consume it with
so I get it, and I don't care how it happened. I'm not here to pass any judgment or blame. All I'm saying is that it's an addendum. But it's not, but it says an addendum, but it doesn't actually provide the full report. So if I were looking at the full report, you know, looking back and I saw this report and there's an addendum, I would not have any idea how that related to the rest of the report. I mean, I don't know if it's a difficult task. I just always think when you're going to addend something, you should probably have something more cohesive than just the single piece of paper, which doesn't explain the whole story. And I know what you're saying about next year, but right now that's a whole year away, a year less 2 months. And I'm just wondering how we could make it so that it's much more succinct for people who may see this, because you'd be surprised by the number of people who do want to see these things.
Yeah, no, in my intention with this supplementary thing was to highlight the error and to show what the correct data was. If you need to see it in a different format, is that what I'm hearing? Yeah,
I just wondered, like, maybe I'm just alone on this, but it just has such a comprehensive report.
Yeah.
And this one has the errors on it. And I just thought the errors could maybe be corrected in this comprehensive report. And also it could be put out like that. So anybody who's trying to get information from London Police Service gets the report with the proper information throughout and not just on the single page. Because there's other errors in this report, right?
No, that's where I've gone through all of those charts with a fine tooth comb.
This is where, like in this report, it's where it talks about there being 180 citizen, 77%, 180 citizen, 85 police, 34 animal. That actually is taken directly from the previous year. And that's where the error stemmed from.
But the earlier charts are correct. What I can do, if you'd like, is I can just resubmit the whole entire report.
With the corrected information.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm
what you'd
asking.
like?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just because I think it's more clear than for somebody looking in from the outside.
No problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Can I get a motion then? Board receives for purposes the annual use of force statistical report for 2022 addendum. Moved by Councillor Raymond, second by Councillor Stevenson. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. Thank you. We're going to go to our committees, our advisory panels update. The first one I'll do is ARAP, which is the Anti-Racism Advisory Panel. The next one will be the MHAP, which is the mental health one by Vice Chair Walker. I can let everybody know that you guys are okay with me using the acronym ARAP. Met last May 3rd. Last meeting was on May 3rd. Just kind of a small housekeeping thing. We used to meet kind of on an ad hoc. We would canvass the committee and say, hey, who can meet? We pick a date. Now we've changed the format a little bit. So we're going to meet on the first Wednesday of every month to provide some consistency and continuity and able to plan a little bit better. So we always have a great conversation at ARAP. This one was largely focused on the London Police Services Board citizen vacancy. Mayor Morgan, who's also a member of ARAP, came and Siri's listening here. And then Mayor Morgan came and provided the duality of the hats that you wear, right? So he's a member of the Police Services Board. He's a member of ARAP, but he never will cease to be the mayor, right? Or at least until the term's up, right? And so he came and provided
And then
some
you won't.
and beyond, and so he provided some insight to ARAP in terms of the City of London process, and specifically the kind of revised process that the city's going through right now. Great conversation, great questions. And the committee provided Mayor Morgan with their input and their feedback with regards to questions that might be considered by City Council as they embark and kind of continue through that process there. I know it's a little bit of a deviation, Mayor Morgan. I'm not sure because you kind of spoke about that at ARAP. If you wanted to actually speak about that right now, or yeah.
Just add something.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I'll just add something brief. There were two purposes to me presenting to the committee. One was to let them know the general process that I was going to propose to council to follow for feedback. And two was to ask if they had any specific questions that they would like us to consider, much like I did with the board here. So as a small update, that process, after that feedback and advice went to committee. Committee approved it with a couple of minor changes to the process that I outlined, and that has been approved by council. And now we will have the interviews on June 5th, and to be approved by council at some point after that. So so that's when we'll have the actual interviews. But I wanted to say thank you to both the board as well as the committee for their feedback and their thoughts on both the process as well as the suggested questions.
And I can just further clarify that both the board and the committee provided direct questions to council for their consideration, both during discussion at ARAP, as well as a few emails that were sent by members after the fact saying, hey, I think this is a good question that you might want to consider. So it was very engaging, and it was exactly how it's supposed to work, right? So thank you to Mayor Morgan for his participation in that process. Just for housekeeping, the next ARAP meeting is scheduled for June 7th, and I'll report back at the next subsequent June meeting that one there. So subject to any questions from my colleagues here about anything that was reported there. Anybody questions, clarification? Okay, no. I will look over to Vice Chair Walker for a similar update from MHAP, Mental Health and Addictions Advisory Panel.
Thank you. So our last meeting was May 3rd. We are also now meeting on a regular basis on the first Wednesday of each month. We received a great presentation related to London's whole community system response from Inspector Blair Harvey, and he sits on the committee, so he was very informative. Very much appreciate him, of course. And we did issue a call for community panel members, which went out, and we had a significant response to that with 33 individuals applying to be on the committee. So we now have had circulated all of the applications to review, and then we will make our decision at our next meeting, June 7th, because we'll have to discuss it and then make the decision. So anyway, it's just been a phenomenal response from the community, and we're very grateful. And that is the report.
Thank you, Vice Chair Walker. Any questions for Vice Chair Walker with regards to her verbal report? Okay, seeing none, we can proceed forward. No motions required for those verbal updates. Next item on the agenda is number 10, which is my verbal update. So we're going to, there's there's 4 things I believe that I'm going to provide an update. I'm going to kind of pass one over to you, Vice Chair Walker, on Bill C-48. I have some things to share, but I'll you know what, why don't we start with that one, and then if there's anything I want to add, go ahead. So I'll yield the mic to you there.
Thank you. So it was short notice that was provided by the government to sit in on the public presentation around C-48. Basically, the summary, which is provided by the government, indicates that the plan is to create a reverse onus provision for any person charged with a serious offense involving violence and the use of weapon who has been convicted within the last 5 years of a serious offense involving violence and the use of a weapon. Add certain firearms offenses to the existing reverse onus provisions. Expand the reverse onus provision for offenses involving intimate partner violence to ensure it applies an accused person who has been previously discharged for such an offense, and require the court to consider if an accused person has any previous convictions involving violence to include in the record of statement that the safety and security of the community was considered. So I listened to the entire presentation. Obviously, like the government tends to table these things, but they're not perfect. And so there will be feedback, I'm sure, from the association. Also, women's organizations will be providing feedback around that. And I think that's about all I have. They did outline the objective is to strengthen the bail system response, address the issue of firearms, and enhance public safety. They did discuss all of the tragic events that have occurred involving the homicide of police officers. And I think that was all I really have, actually. I have more, but I don't think we need to go through the entire thing, do we?
No.
Yeah.
And I'll just add to that. So in addition to the substance of what Vice Chair Walker said, this announcement was the culmination of a lot of time, effort, and resources that were expended by every level of government, associations across the country, police boards, police services, chiefs of police, right? Back in January of 2023, every premier in the country signed a joint letter to the Prime Minister advocating for the criminal reform, reform to the Criminal Code of Canada. The Ontario Chiefs of Police advocated for that. Police associations here in London and across the province and the country advocated. Police boards, even us, we wrote a letter. Former Chief Williams and myself penned a letter to the Prime Minister of Canada on behalf of the service and the board, calling for this action. And it was the culmination of a concerted and uniform voice. Actually, more so, if I'm being honest with you, more so than like. It's rare to get consensus on a lot of issues the way that consensus with regards to these provisions. It was really a wholesale movement in. So I'm glad that the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General of Canada introduced Bill C-48. I'm under no illusion that this will be a fix-all a solution to all of the issues, but it is a step towards mitigating the risk to members, not just the public, but members of the police service here in London and across the country, to try to mitigate the degree to which they are exposed to violence, threats by repeat violent prolific offenders. And so I just want to say on that front, I had to open this meeting with a statement again for the third time. There's no magic wand solution to this, but there are a series of steps that we can take. And I'm glad that finally, after much effort has been exerted, that we seem to be moving down. Now it takes time, right? Just because it's introduced now, we know it could take a while before it becomes law, but at least we're moving that proverbial ball down the field, and that's a good news thing right there. So any questions, comments, statements with regards to that before I move on to the next thing? Okay.
Does
All right.
anybody want this circulated? The actual draft code?
Like within the board?
Yeah.
We all got.
Oh, yeah, everybody got this one. Okay, good. Sorry.
Yeah, perfect. So that's great. My next agenda item on the chair's verbal update is the recent changes announced by Solicitor General Michael Kersner, which was intended to encourage recruitment to the policing profession. The province has decided to remove tuition fees for the basic constable training program at the Ontario Police College, which will be retroactive to recruits back to January of 2023, so this year. There was also an announcement that there would be opening up of an additional 70 spaces per cohort in the program, and to add an additional cohort so that there are 4 groups of 550 officers graduating each year to better address the demand for police officers, which is another thing that has been the subject matter of advocacy from all corners and facets of policing in the community at large there. There's going to be a total cost of that, provincial cost of $34 million. And then the last piece of that is the announcement that new recruits will no longer need to graduate from post-secondary education as a prerequisite to become a police officer. And that currently under the Community Safety and Policing Act, as it stands as of this moment, police officer also needs to have a university or college degree as a prerequisite. So that has been eliminated, and it's all under the auspices of trying to encourage and facilitate a greater number of officers that we desperately need across the province there. So are there any questions before I move on? That I know it's kind of awkward in terms of questions, but these are kind of hot topic button items. So I wanted to just open it to the floor if there's any comments or questions about that. Okay, seeing none. Moving on, just comes some housekeeping matters. New chief, Chief Designate Tai Trung, will begin his role officially as Chief of the London Police Service on Thursday, June 1st. The Deputy Chief recruitment process, we are on the cusp of making an announcement on that soon. So just hold tight just a little bit longer. And the change of command ceremony from retired Chief Steve Williams to Chief Chief Designate Trung is now planned for June 26th. So June 26th in the morning. If anybody wants to, for the media, mark their calendars for that date. Looking over to that side of the room. It's June 26th there. So subject to any questions that I have with regards to the last facets of the chair's verbal update. Any questions, concerns, debate? All right, seeing none, may I have a motion that the board receives the chair's verbal update related to the business of the board? Moved by Councillor Stevenson, seconded by Member Branscombe. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. Ms. Foster, Administrator verbal update.
I'm very happy to report that you covered off and the mayor covered off. That's some of the things I was going to talk about, the citizen appointee and just the change of command date. So thank you.
Thank you. No report means no questions. Okay, very good. There was no new business because we captured yours under the chair's verbal report. So that's fine right there. Again, housekeeping, the next London Police Services Board public meeting will be on June 15th, 2023. That's it, everybody. So can I get a motion to adjourn the, oh yes, I knew I was forgetting something. Councillor Stevenson is great news. I think we may have announced it at the last meeting, but I'm going to reaffirm for those who may have missed it. For the first time in a long time, we have Councillor Susan Stevenson is our representative on the OAPSB. You guys and your acronyms, by the way, right? That's like, I have one file dedicated to police acronyms and another dedicated to education acronyms, right? But Ontario Association of Police Services Boards. And so London, we haven't had a seat at that on that board for a long time. And Councillor Stevenson graciously put her name forward and was elected as our representative for a 4-year term, and will represent London's voice at this. So you were recently at some events, and I wanted to provide you an opportunity to share with the board, the administration, members of the public, some of the insight that you gathered from there. Yeah.
Thank you. And I appreciated the nudge to run for director of this OAPSB because it's an exciting time, actually. The board itself is expanding. It partnered with the ministry to support the training, the mandatory training that's coming out of the new Police Act. And so there's a lot of work to be done, and it looks like a really great group. And it's nice to have a voice on that. I went to a pre-workshop it was a pre-conference workshop. London was well represented there. There was a diversity workshop in the morning, and the OAPSB did a session in the afternoon, which was really great because it gave us the look at, what are the impacts that is going to have on the police service boards. The OAPSB is also, there's representatives from police boards, First Nation police service boards, and OPP detachment boards. So it's policing in general, not just a specific area. And so it was a really great day. I appreciate the board letting me attend. It was great to connect with 3 of the members on the board. It's got me more excited about being a part of it. And it was really valuable. There were a lot of resources, which I'm sharing with the board, about what are the impacts to start getting us ready for, there's some significant changes coming. One of them is that there's going to be mandatory training for police service members before they can vote, before they can be voting members. And the OAPSB has partnered with the ministry to help launch that online training. And just this past week, I think Jen let me know that they were looking for other members to be, they're calling it a community of practice, that's going to support the launch of the mandatory online training modules and give input and help finalize it before it launches. So I was lucky enough to be a member on that as well. So there's lots of changes happening, and I do appreciate being part of it.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. I can't think of a better way to end the meeting than that right there. So I appreciate your representation and your constant feedback, and it's a great thing to have you your voice at the table there. So, any questions for Councillor Stevenson based on her update there? Okay, seeing none. Now I will ask for an adjournment. Can I get a mover, Member Branscombe, seconded by Councillor Stevenson? I doubt anyone's opposed to that, right? Okay, seeing none. Motion to adjourn is carried. Meeting over. Thank you, everybody.